Greetings, everyone. This is Qesheth again, and 93. This is the 11th in a series of talks entitled Tarot, the Major Arcana, and the Paths of Return. In this talk, I will be talking about Atu 11, Justice or Adjustment. In the previous talk, I talked about Atu 12, the Hanged Man. In that card, the aspirant is in a state of suspension, in the trance called the sleep of Shalom, also referred to as Samadhi in Buddhism. Here in this card, the aspirant undergoes a further adjustment, where all imbalances are corrected. We started these talks on the paths of the personality, where the work was done on the manifested physical self, the nephesh. Now, there in the Bariatic realms, there are further purifications and corrections to be made on the path of ascent. The number of this card can either be 8 or 11. In the Marseilles version of the tarot, and Crowley's, to name just a couple, this card is number 8. But there is no change in the location of this card on the Tree of Life. Just the numerical sequence has been changed. This has to do with the sequence of the signs in astrology. But because these talks are concerned with the cards and their placement on the paths, which by the way did not change, we will be using the traditional sequence. The Sefer Yetzirah has this to say about this path. The 22nd path is the faithful intelligence, and is so called because by it spiritual virtues are increased, and all dwellers on earth are nearly under its shadow. The faithful intelligence, faithful in its duties, faithful in holding the equilibrium of the universe. The card number is 11. Showing the union of the 5 and the 6, the union of macrocosm with the microcosm. The card title is Adjustment, or in the old Aeon, Justice. The card title is The Daughters of the Lords of Truth, the ruler of the balance. This card is path number 22. It connects Gubura, Mars, and Tiphareth, the Sun, Spirit. Here. This is one of the astrological paths. Again, we talked about there being 4 elemental paths, 7 planetary paths, and 12 astrological paths. This particular card, this path, is ruled by Libra, who is ruled by Venus, wherein Saturn is exalted, showing the binding effect of Venus and the balancing and correcting effect of Bina, Saturn. Here. The Hebrew letter is Lamed, meaning ox goad, which is a prod used to move and control oxen. The numerical value of Lamed is 30. We will start with a reading entitled Liber Librae, the Book of Balance. It is a Golden Dawn manuscript that was later modified by Crowley. Learn first, O thou who aspirest unto our ancient order, that equilibrium is the basis of the work. If thou thyself hast not a sure foundation, whereon wilt thou stand to direct the forces of nature? Know then that as man is born into this world amidst the darkness of matter and the strife of contending forces, so must his first endeavor be to seek the light through their reconciliation. Thou then who hast trials and troubles, rejoice because of them, for in them is strength, and by their means is a pathway opened unto that light. How should it be otherwise, O man, whose life is but a day in eternity, a drop in the ocean of time? How, were thy trials not many, could thou purge thy soul from the dross of the earth? Is it but now that the higher life is beset with dangers and difficulties? Hath it not ever been so with the sages and hierophants of the past? They have been persecuted and reviled, they have been tormented of men, yet through this also has their glory increased. Rejoice therefore, O initiate, for the greater thy trial, the greater thy triumph. When men shall revile thee and speak against thee falsely, has not the Master said, Blessed art thou? Yet, O aspirant, let thy victories bring thee not vanity, for with increase of knowledge should come increase of wisdom. He who knoweth little thinketh he knoweth much, but he who knoweth much has learned his own ignorance. See thou a man wise in his own conceit, there is more hope of a fool than of him. Be not hasty to condemn others. How knowest thou that in their place thou couldst have resisted the temptation? And even were it so, why shouldst thou despise one who is weaker than thyself? Thou therefore who desirest magical gifts, be sure that thy soul is firm and steadfast, for it is by flattering thy weaknesses that the weak ones will gain power over thee. Humble thyself before thyself, yet fear neither man nor spirit. Fear is failure and the forerunner of failure, and courage is the beginning of virtue. Therefore fear not the spirits, but be firm and courteous with them, for thou hast no right to despise or revile them. And this too may lead thee astray. Command and banish them, curse them by the great names if need be, but neither mock nor revile them, for so assuredly wilt thou be led into error. A man is what he makes himself within the limits fixed by his inherited destiny. He is part of mankind. His actions affect not only what he calls himself, but also the whole universe. Worship and neglect not the physical body, which is thy temporary connection with the outer and material world. Therefore, let thy mental equilibrium be above disturbance by material events. Strengthen and control the animal passions. Discipline the emotions and the reason. Nourish the highest aspirations. Do good unto others for its own sake, not for reward, not for gratitude from them, not for sympathy. If thou art generous, thou wilt not long for thine eyes to be tickled by expressions of gratitude. Remember that unbalanced force is evil, that unbalanced severity is but cruelty and oppression, but that also unbalanced mercy is but weakness, which allow and abet evil. Act passionately, think rationally, be thyself. True ritual is as much action as word, it is will. Remember that this earth is but an atom in the universe, and that thou thyself art but an atom thereon, and that even could thou become the god of this earth whereon thou crawlest and grovellest, that thou would even then be but an atom and one among many. Nevertheless, have the greatest self-respect, and to that end sin not against thyself. The sin which is unpardonable is knowingly and wilfully to reject truth, to fear knowledge, lest that knowledge pander not to thy prejudices. To obtain magic power, learn to control thought. Admit only those ideas that are in harmony with the end desired, and not every stray and contradictory idea that presents itself. Fixed thought is a means to an end, therefore pay attention to the power of silent thought and meditation. The material act is but the outward expression of thy thought, and therefore hath it been said that the thought of foolishness is sin. Thought is the commencement of action, and if a chance thought can produce much effect, what cannot a fixed thought do? Therefore, as hath already been said, establish thyself firmly in the equilibrium of the forces, in the center of the cross of the elements, that cross from whose center the creative word issued in the birth of the dawning universe. Be thou therefore prompt and active as the sylphs, but avoid frivolity and caprice. Be energetic and strong like the salamanders, but avoid irritability and ferocity. Be flexible and attentive to images like the undines, but avoid idleness and changeability. Be laborious and patient like the gnomes, but avoid grossness and avarice. So shalt thou gradually develop the powers of thy soul and fit thyself to command the spirits of the elements. For wert thou to summon the gnomes to pander to thine avarice, thou would no longer command them, but they would command thee. Wouldst thou abuse the pure beings of the woods and the mountains to fill thy coffers and satisfy thy hunger for gold? Wouldst thou debase the spirits of living fire to serve thy wrath and hatred? Wouldst thou violate the purity of the souls of the waters to pander to thy lust of debauchery? Wouldst thou force the spirits of the evening breeze to minister to thy folly and caprice? Know that with such desires thou canst but attract the weak, not the strong, and in that case the weak will have power over thee. In true religion there is no sect, therefore take heed that thou blaspheme not the name by which another knoweth his God. For if thou do this thing in Jupiter, thou wilt blaspheme Yod-He-Vav-He, and in Osiris Yod-He-Shavav-He. Ask and ye shall have, seek and ye shall find, knock and it shall be opened unto you. This is a great book. Very highly recommended reading. I thought that this talk would be very suitable for the time of the fall equinox, the time of balance, a time when we in the northern hemisphere begin our transition into the dark half of the year, a time for the unconscious works of dreaming, meditation, scrying, and contact with the spirit world, a time for seeking balance through working with our shadows. The equinoxes mark a time that the night and day are equal, times marking balance and equilibrium, before movement begins again, as shown in the Wheel of Fortune card that we'll be discussing next. This card, adjustment, represents balanced motion. An example would be of riding a bike. This work that we do, this great work, is an unnatural work, meaning that we are correcting the laws of nature within ourselves, going against the law of nature per se, the law of tooth and claw. Here, we use our purified reason, now governed by true will, Tippereth, to direct our animal instincts to higher aspirations. Let's take a look at the cards. First, we will look at Waite's card here. It shows a man representing the Ruach, the reasoning faculty, also the pillar of equilibrium, holding the scales of balance and judgment, ready with the sword of correction, discrimination, and reason to deal with any of impure heart that would try to enter into the gate of the mysteries. The sword is the weapon of Mars, a weapon of the Ruach. Here. The reasoning faculty that is used for discrimination. His is pointed towards Gebura. He is clothed in red, showing Waite's emphasis on the martial aspects of this path. His cloak is the green of Venus. The veil is of royal purple, for he guards the gates of the mysteries, its color also showing the Jupiterian influence of Hesed. Here. The Demiurge, the organizer of the universe. He sits before the veil, between two pillars, the pillars of Boaz and Jachin, that stand before the entrance to King Solomon's temple, the Holy of Holies. His crown represents Kether, who shines above him and is the governing force within the aspirant, represented as the Yeketa, the spirit that resides in the supernals, the highest unmanifested aspect of the aspirant, now becoming manifest. After all, it is the aspirant's HGA that has been directing these operations all along. And you see the background here, the yellow of Tippereth, the sun. And again, the Father is the Son, and the Son is the Father. Let's look at Crowley's card. Before that, I want to read something that Crowley has to say about his card. This woman goddess is Harlequin. She is the partner and fulfillment of the Fool. She is the ultimate illusion, which is manifestation. She is the dance many-colored, many-wild of life itself. Constantly whirling, all possibilities are enjoyed under the phantom show of space and time. All things are real. The soul is the surface, precisely because they are instantly compensated by this adjustment. All things are harmony and beauty. All things are truth, because they cancel out. Crowley's card is called adjustment because, as he says, nature is not just, it is exact. Nature is not merciful. She weeds out the weak and favors the strong. She is always perfecting her forms. She destroys without mercy any imperfection, corrects any imbalance. We see a woman standing on tiptoe, representing perfect balance and equilibrium, for she is Bina, the great and sometimes awful mother, keeping all things in balance. She is the complement of the Fool on this path. For he is spirit and motion, air, prana, ki, vril. His letter Aleph, meaning ox, and her letter Lamed, meaning ox-goad, show the relationship between these two paths. She is the force that regulates the movements of the Fool. Crowley's book, Liber Legis, the Book of the Law, was called Liber All. All is also the Hebrew name for God manifested in Hesed. Here. Her number is 30, and the Fool's number is 1, equaling 31. The number 31 adds to 4, which is also the number for Hesed. There are also many other mysteries concerning this number for the aspirant to discover. I have no time to go into this card. I could discuss for hours, days. There's so many mysteries here. For instance, the number 4 conceals the number 10, the number of Malkuth, which kind of points to the initiation after, which kind of points to the initiation after the initiation of Gebura, which is the initiation of the major adept, the major adeptus, pointing to the next initiation that the initiate would go through, which would be exemptus adeptus. This card is about the keeping of equilibrium. Everything in our created universe exists because of the balance maintained by the universal mind. Our atmosphere, our oceans, etc., are always in perfect balance to maintain life. Too much salt, no marine life. If the balance of gases in our atmosphere is out of balance, we do not breathe. Nature always seeks to maintain equilibrium and will do whatever is necessary to correct any imbalances. The greater the imbalance, the greater the correction. It's like the swinging of the pendulum. The greater the swing, the more the return. This is kind of the problem in the world today. Nature is taking severe measures to correct imbalances in our world. She will make the correction whether or not we are in the way or not. She doesn't care about our homes or our families. Fires, floods, and drought are all increasing because the imbalance is caused by climate change. Regardless if people believe that if it's caused by humans or not, we should not be adding fuel to the flames. Also, we have the problem of our current dominant religious view that is causing an imbalance and a dichotomy in the psyche of man. Our world is a world of contrast, light and shadow. Everything exists because its opposite exists. Here in Crowley's card, you see the spheres and the pyramids. See, right here? Of green and blue, colors attributed to Venus and Jupiter show the contrast of the manifested universe and represent law and limitation. They are in perfect balance. She wears the feathers of Mot, which tremble at the slightest imbalance. They are attached to the scales, as you see here. Mot was the Egyptian vulture goddess who was responsible for keeping everything in the universe in right order. Mot meant to the Egyptians that which is right. The ancient Egyptians termed everything that was in perfect balance and equilibrium Mot. These are the feathers that the deceased person's heart will be weighed against in the Egyptian judgment of the dead, overseen by Anubis, the guardian of the threshold of life and death. If the heart of the deceased is not found right or Mot, the deceased was torn to shreds. Let this be a lesson to the aspirant always to seek balance, remembering that the greater the imbalance, the greater the correction. The vulture was believed by the early Egyptians to be impregnated by air, and the fool is air. And this is also an air sign, uh, cardinal air. Libra is a cardinal air sign. Okay. The vulture is also associated with the Negretto phase of the great work. It was seen that she consumes the putrid and rotten and purifies and transforms that energy to be reused, recycled, for a vulture's feces is actually sterile. On her forehead is the Uraeus serpent, a symbol of royalty and the opened Anja chakra, or the Anya chakra, the third eye chakra. On the hilt of the sword there are two crescents, representing the balance of light and dark, conscious and unconscious, with three small spheres pointing to the corrective action of Bina, Saturn. Saturn also represents time, where all these judgments take place. Her scales bear the Greek letters Alpha and Omega, the beginning and the end, showing that the birth of anything marks its eventual end. Also, the act of canceling out any idea by weighing it against its opposite. She bears the sword of Mars, the effect of Gebura on this path here. The sword of correction pointed downward toward the creative universe Asaya, for she is always on her guard to correct imbalances. And this is the world of Asaya down in here. As it says in the Sefer Yetzirah that we read earlier, all dwellers on earth are nearly under its shadow. All creation is governed by law and limitation. She is enclosed in a vesica piscis, through which this balanced and sublimated energy comes into manifestation. This is Venus in her highest aspect as the Empress. This is her highest aspect as the Empress, giving birth and maintaining the universe through balance and equilibrium. For the astrological path of Venus, the astrological glyph for Venus encompasses the entire tree of life. This card represents the formula of love under will. I discussed the action of Venus on these cards and paths in the previous talks. It is the binding force of the carbon atom. Crowley called this the woman justified by equilibrium, and the self-sacrifice. Crowley called this the woman justified by equilibrium, and self-sacrifice is the gate. Think about this. The soul, the anima mundi, freed from the bonds of matter, returning to her throne and awakening the eld of the All-Father. For she is the final He of the divine name, Yod-He, Vav-He. Here. The woman, the soul, Sophia, the Shekinah, now liberated, married to her lover, the Yekata, the spirit, and able to fulfill her divine will. Another lesson hidden in this card that Crowley liked to point out is the fact that in the new aeon, women have greater potential and opportunity than ever before in history. As women, they must now take the sword of reason and use it to control their emotional nature. For it says in Liber Legis, let the woman be girt with the sword before me. If you get this card in a reading, it would definitely recommend. It would definitely mean a need for equilibrium or balance in your life. Let's take a quick look at the attributions. The stone is emerald, which is a stone of Venus. The plant is aloe. The animal is the elephant. The magic power are works of justice and equilibrium. Some of the god forms are Mat, Themis, Minos, Yama, and Vulcan. The drug is tobacco. The perfume is galbanum. It is the cross of equilibrium. In the body, it rules the liver. The holy book study would be Liber Librae. And we will finish this talk with a short reading from Crowley. Balance against each thought its exact opposite. Balance against each thought its exact opposite. For the marriage of these is the annihilation of illusion. I hope that you are enjoying this series of talks. Again, my name is Qesheth. I am doing these talks in order to help people to have a better understanding of these paths and their spiritual journey. If there's anything else you would like for me to cover, please leave it in the comment section below. Please like this video. I will continue to do all the cards of the Major Arcana, the rest of them. I will probably stop after Atu 10, the Wheel of Fortune, and do a quick discussion on the small cards. I will not be going through each small card discussing its meaning or its symbology, but I will be showing some really cool ways to be looking at these cards. Various attributions will help you get better understanding of them. Again, thank you. 93.